Listen, listen. The sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. Listen, listen. The sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. Listen, listen. The sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. I don't speak very loudly, so I hope you can hear. And what a beautiful day and a setting we have here at Fish Lake to learn a little bit more deeply about the Dharma and the Sangha. We can do this if we fully understand what led to the Buddha's first Dharma talk after his awakening. And he offered this Dharma talk to his 5 co-practitioners, the 5 ascetics. The first thing we have to realize about the Buddha is that he was very determined. He had a strong will to succeed in his quest for awakening. So for Siddhartha Gautama to become Shakyamuni Buddha required a great deal of determination. And he tried all the routes. He tried the self-mortification, the extreme austerity of asceticism. He'd studied and moved on from all the great teachers of his times. And in his penultimate stage, shared with the 5 ascetic friends, he used his mind to suppress his mind. He used his mind to suppress his body, and it almost killed him. So he adopted the middle way of ahimsa, of not doing violence to himself or doing violence to anybody else, and not indulging in sensual pleasures. He became very, very patient and very, very still. But his 5 friends left him thinking that the Buddha had abandoned the path of practice. After his awakening, after he achieved full enlightenment, he wanted to find his 5 friends. So he walked from Bodh Gaya to Deer Park to find them. And he took his time. Just as under the Bodhi tree, after his enlightenment, he took his time to find the appropriate vessels or containers, the words and the concepts into which he could put his insights. And this is what he wanted to, first of all, share with his 5 friends. And when he found them at Deer Park, they could not resist his radiance. But they were fearful. They were overwhelmed by the Buddha's presence. And there's a wonderful account of this written by Moira Caldecott in her book On the Sacred Tree. Allow me to read this to you. At Bodh Gaya, he sat under a tree and did not move from there for 49 days. Time passed and did not pass. He could feel the great tree drawing nourishment and energy from the earth. He could feel it drawing nourishment and energy from the air and sun. He began to feel the same energy pumping in his heart. There was no distinction between the tree and himself. He was the tree. The tree was him. The earth and sky were also part of the tree and hence of him. When he found his companions, they found him so shining and radiant they could hardly look at him directly. He could have said, "There is no distinction. There's no suffering once one experiences the wholeness of things. There is only suffering if we think in terms of separation. I and thou, this and that, before and after, here and there. There is only suffering if we desire what we think is outside ourselves, not realizing that we have everything because everything is contained within the I. He took a leaf and held it towards his disciples. In it was the whole essence of the universe that was also in him. His disciples saw it glowing with the same radiance that he saw. And the Buddha said to his 5 friends, "Dear friends, I have found the path and I will share it with you." And his friends were still stunned. And they felt that he had abandoned the practice. So they asked him, how could he have attained the truth if he had abandoned the practice? And the Buddha said to them, "I am telling you the truth. You have never known me to lie. I have attained enlightenment and will share it with you." The 5 ascetics then asked him to share and to teach. And the Buddha did so. Through the vessels of the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path to awakening, he delivered his first Dharma talk, the Great Turning of the Wheel. And he showed clearly a noble path of practice that leads out of suffering, into the experience of happiness, no fear, and enlightenment. And halfway through his talk, one of the 5 ascetics, a gentleman by the name of Kondanya, his face just lit up and shone with understanding from the core of his being. And the Buddha stopped his talk and said, "Kondanya understands, Kondanya understands, Kondanya understands." And this is the second lion's roar. The first lion's roar was when the Buddha gave his first Dharma talk, and the lion's roar resonated throughout the cosmos in all the 10 directions. The second lion's roar is when somebody truly gets it with the core of their being. I remember some years ago I told this story to a class of school children that I was introducing the Buddha's first Dharma talk to, about the 2 lions' roars. And halfway through the class, all these children started to roar at the same time. So if you decide to roar, do it silently within your mind and just smile. Now, the noble path out of suffering begins with right view. It's really very important to understand this. And it requires that we understand the necessity of non-attachment to views. And by extension, non-attachment to the teachings, and ultimately non-attachment to the teacher, himself or herself. And here is where we have to understand the teachings of the Buddha. Why was he offering them in the manner that he did? He offered them as a raft to help individuals go to the shore of non-suffering. You have to release the raft, which is the teachings and the Dharma practices, in order to get to the other shore. Once you've got to the other shore, you don't pick up the raft and strap it on your back. That is just foolish. It's absurd. You let it go. You have the teachings in your own heart, and they manifest in your behavior. So in a way, you throw the teachings away. The Dharma is offered as skillful means. The Sanskrit word for this is upaya. It helps you to touch the truth. If you are attached to the Dharma, if you're caught by 2,600-year-old forms, you'll get lost in your attachment. And instead of enlightenment, joy, and happiness, you will only experience suffering, because where there is attachment, suffering is sure to follow very, very closely. If this is not well understood, the teachings, the sutras, and the instruments offered by the Buddha, they become snakes that bite. So see the teachings of the Buddha, the instruments of practice, as skillful means, as instruments to aid your understanding so that you can touch the truth. And find the skillful ways to use them. Otherwise, teachings can do more harm than good. And the Buddha often said that he in his 45 years of teaching, he basically hadn't said anything. He actually said a great deal, but he was very aware that his listeners would get caught in his words, and he was giving them a reminder, a warning, not to get caught in his words and his teachings, but to use them as skillful means in order to understand the truth. So let's examine the Buddha's references to Sangha and skillfully take them into our consciousness so that we use them in a very good way. The Sangha, I think we could look at this as the crowning masterpiece of the Buddha's life. It needs a lot of heart, energy, love, and above all else, great skill to build a Sangha. When the Buddha was 80, he met his friend King Prosenjit for the last time. The king was also 80. And the king said to the Buddha, "Teacher, when I see the Sangha moving around, I have more trust and respect and love for you." When you see the masterpiece like that, you see better the artist, the creator of the masterpiece. Now, the Sangha, the community of practice, is one continuation of the original artist. That is the Buddha. It's the vehicle, the Sangha is the vehicle for the authentic Buddha and the Dharma to manifest. And a good Sangha always carries the authentic Buddha, the authentic Dharma within it, given that there is mindfulness, concentration and insight within the Sangha. And Thich Nhat Hanh has often said that Sangha building is the noblest profession of the 21st century. In other words, Sangha building can be the masterpiece of your life, just as it was the masterpiece of the Buddha's life. So let's understand a little bit more about Sangha. The first thing to bring to mind is that in the context of a Sangha, practicing with spiritual friends, there's a very powerful collective energy that is created which you cannot create on your own. You feel that you're one single cell within a Sangha body, and the energy of the Sangha body penetrates the mind and body of everybody in the Sangha. When you start to experience the Sangha in that way, each moment with the Sangha is a wonderful opportunity to be nourished, to be healed, and to be transformed. This cannot happen on your own. And practicing diligently with the Sangha takes the qualities of mindfulness, concentration, and insight. These are the three marks of the authentic Buddha, the authentic Dharma. It takes them far deeper, much, much deeper than you can do if you're traveling solo. It invites all the cells and the neurons inside you to practice and to listen deeply. Then the authentic Buddha, the authentic Dharma are home within you. And there's such peace, there's such happiness, and there's also such determination to keep this goodness flowing in a direction, is to be part of a Sangha river, not to be a lonely little cell suffering in a corner. So taking refuge in the Sangha, which is one of the three gems, provides protection, it provides nourishment. And I say again, it offers an energy that is not there with the individual. So when you become empowered by the collective energy of the Sangha, you're no longer a separate entity. You're no longer alone and unloved. You're embraced by the collective energy of the Sangha. So from the Sangha we can benefit and profit greatly. And the Buddha taught the significance of the Sangha through jokes and through humor. The Buddha had a great sense of humor. But his humor and his jokes, they were foundations of practice. And if we get his jokes, we see that they're about us and how we practice. And he tells a joke about a foolish person who's dying of thirst, wailing and lamenting, walking alongside a riverbank. There's a swiftly flowing river right next to him, but he doesn't have the right instrument, a cup or a bowl, to dip into the river. So he laments and wails and dies of thirst. That's a joke about us. It's a joke about practice, because the river is a swiftly flowing Sangha body. If we don't have the instruments, the cup or the bowl, to drink from that Sangha, then we will die of thirst. We will die in one way or another from our lonely suffering in our corner. So where do we find the Buddha and his sense of humor? We find it, first of all, in our body and in our mind. So we have to train ourselves to look deeply into our body and mind, because that's where everything is. So we have to respect our body and our mind. Be very careful what we put into our body and our mind, because our body is not ours. Our mind is not ours. It belongs to our ancestors, our descendants, and our friends. So what we put into our body and what we put into our mind is something that is shared with future generations. So being mindful in our consumption, our everyday consumption, is part of the legacy we leave for our descendants. And in the situation of global warming caused by excessive consumption, we have to change our ways. Not tomorrow or the next day, we change our ways now. The future is now. What you leave for your descendants is predicated by what you do now. So if any of you drove here in a Hummer, please trade it in. Go to the nearest car dealer and find a respectable hybrid car or something like this. So in a sense, by respecting our body and mind, we're taking care of future generations. And we take care, first of all, by taking responsibility for our 5 skandhas, for our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our mental formations and consciousness. We also find the Buddha and his humor in the Sangha. We have to be very conscious about Sangha building. Never has the time for Sangha building been more urgent than the present times that we live in. And we have to be really aware about the significance of the Sangha presence in our lives. How are we when we're not part of a Sangha presence? Is this different from when we are practicing diligently with a Sangha? Try it as an experiment and know from your own experience what serves you. And Thich Nhat Hanh gives us a very simple recipe. 3 is enough, 4 is excellent, and 5 is wonderful. And I add to this recipe by saying 2 is not enough and 1 is impossible. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about cornerstones of a Sangha. This is how Sanghas are built, through cornerstones. 3 are enough. 4 is great and 5 is just wonderful. 2 cannot work. Because if 2 people are in a Sangha, they will stay as 2 people for a long, long time. You need that third to somehow activate them out of their communication and mutual understanding and perhaps codependency. 1 is clearly impossible. Practicing alone, you cannot build a Sangha. Cornerstones, 3, 4, and 5. Now, who does this? It's you. It's me. It's everyone who wants to make Sangha the noblest profession of the 21st century. This is how you make the Sangha the masterpiece of your life. Now, how are they created? They're created by 3 people, or 4, or 5, who build harmony simply from the joy of being with one another, having a mindful tea or coffee, doing walking meditation together, singing together. And I think of 3 magnificent young women in my home Sangha in Pinegate in Ottawa. Their names are Emily, Trisha and Nadia, and they live in the same neighborhood. And they meet for morning meditation before they go to work. One will go into a coffee shop, and very soon the second one there, the third one is there, and they create harmony. They sing together. They've now started a satellite Sangha of Pinegate, and they're drawing many people in the neighborhood. And the magnet is the harmony that they have created as a threesome. They're magnificent. And there are many other people in our Sangha at home who do this, because I have challenged them. Examine your busy work life. See who lives near you in your neighborhood. If you're going to lunch, why not have lunch with a Sangha member? Create the harmony. And what the harmony does, it changes the neurons in the heart. 60% of the cells in our heart are neurons. Those neurons become aligned with the synchrony of harmony. Then they start communicating to the neurons in the brain, synchronizing harmony. You're building a cornerstone. This is how you build sanghas, 3 people at a time, because their energy is extraordinary. We have many people at Pinegate who have picked up this challenge. They've created cornerstones, and when new people come into Pinegate Sangha, the meditation hall, or even the senior ones who are continuing, they feel that energy as something palpable. And what the cornerstones have done, they have aligned their neurons, their intentions in their hearts and their cells. They have actually experienced harmony, worthwhile company. One young friend, the 3 young women, I've nicknamed them as the sisters in the hood. One of them has said to me, she can't remember what her life was like before the sisters started to get together. And the other 2 are just the same. They have created something extraordinary. And we have a lot of children coming to the Sangha at Pinegate in Ottawa. And the parents tell me that the children are being totally obnoxious and fighting and quarrelsome in the car. They walk it through the Sangha door and they become golden. And they simply can't understand it, but the children are picking up on the energy of neurons being aligned in the direction of harmony. And the children are golden. And they're loved and they're listened to. And that's all really that children need, is to be loved and to be listened to. The odd present now and then will help, but that's not vital. Being loved and being listened to and entering a place of harmony, not discord. So it takes a lot of skill to develop the capacity to be a Sangha builder, but you can all do it. And this is the invitation I extend to all of you. Think what you can do in your busy life. Can you take time out to build a cornerstone? And that cornerstone is a vital ingredient of the growth of a Sangha. So if you have many people constructing cornerstones, magic happens. The Sangha becomes exceedingly powerful. And I'll talk to you about that in a moment. The Buddha was a brilliant Sangha builder. He was just brilliant. But the thing that lay behind his brilliance was his skill. He was very, very skillful. So the invitation is, don't die of thirst on the bank of the river. There's so much in the Sangha river, you simply need the instruments to drink from that river. And that is practice with cornerstones and with the Sangha. And the secret is to learn to flow as a river and not to be a single drop of water. And we could examine the individual and the collective level of this. Because at the individual level, as you all will know, there's so much distress, there's so much pain, there's so much disempowerment, and we feel miserable at the individual level. if that telephone call is for me, I'm not available. And neither are you. That's all right. But at the collective level, you have the energy of Sangha, based on harmony, based on being together joyfully. This energy is powerful enough to heal us. We can reach down deep and touch that energy, and our pain, our troubles, our disillusionment, and our mental illness can recede. I have one dear friend in our Sangha who's very, very worried about the seeds of mental illness in her from her mother. And I've said, yes, there are seeds of mental illness in your store consciousness that you've inherited from your mother. But they do not have to manifest as long as you are creating cornerstones, participating diligently in Sangha life. And that's what she's doing. And she's a Sangha leader. Also a beautiful singer. So the collective level of energy of the Sangha, it's powerful enough to heal and transform us. We just have to be there. Many people will come to the Sangha in Ottawa feeling distressed, miserable, low, depressed, you name it. And I encourage people to come when they are feeling that way. And say, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. Just be in the Sangha energy. And by the time they leave, they're uplifted. When we're alone, we ruminate and inflame our distress. We relive that which makes us dysfunctional over and over and over and over. We've all done it, haven't we? Yes. Over and over. What a waste of time. What a waste of your life when you have the Sangha river flowing right beside you. You just need the cup. You just need the instrument to drink from that river. Don't inflame the distress by being alone. Remember, the Sangha generates a kind of collective energy that is impossible for an individual to generate. Individually, we can do a lot. But we can also get caught, we can also get trapped, and we don't have the energy around us to uplift us. So as an individual drop of water, take refuge in the Sangha river. There you'll find the energy of the Buddha. And think of the Sangha as a wonderful tree in a garden. And you are the gardener. And you take care of the garden, you nurture it, because that garden, that Sangha tree, is going to take care and nurture you. Now there are many simple instruments that we can use to train ourselves. One of them is the bell. Before I invite the bell, I say a little gatha or poem to myself so that I become aligned, so my neurons are woken up. So I recite to myself on the in-breath, body, speech, and mind. Out-breath, in perfect harmony. Then I take it through my body. May the sound of this bell have my heart going along with it, through my body. May it awaken the listener from anxiety and sorrow. Out-breath, through my body. May it take them to the shore of non-suffering. Out-breath, through my body. And then I wake up the bell. And this is the signal. All the neurons are going, oh, I remember that. I pay attention to that. So the neurons become aligned. And when the bell is invited, we stop. We stop our thinking. We stop our ruminating on suffering. We remember the power of the Sangha, and we become present. And when you hear the sound of the bell, being fully invited, there's a gata that you can say. You can just say, listen, listen. The sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. And you can sing this silently to yourself. But we're going to sing it out loud. And I'm going to ask Carolyn to lead this chant because she sings so much better than I do. So we'll go through the process. We're coming to the waking up of the bell. This is neuron alert time. Your neurons are alerted, then the bell is invited.
Listen,
Listen, the sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. Listen, listen, the sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. Listen, listen, the sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. Listen, listen, the sound of the bell takes me back to my true home. Thank you, Carolyn. We have our attention and memory involved with the sound of the bell. The sound of the bell is a training instrument. And when we stop our thinking, stop our worries, interconnect with other members of the Sangha, have our hearts open to their hearts, we're practicing non-self. We are practicing interbeing just with this simple sound of the bell. This is a trainer for Buddhas to be, and we're all Buddhas to be. And there are many other instruments, such as the touching the earth ceremony, or the 4 Brahma Viharas meditation, which is on the Pine Gate Meditation CD. There's not time to talk about them today, but there are so many instruments of practice. They all do the same thing as the bell. They alert our neurons to align with harmony and to come out of the grip of suffering. And the practices then help us to manifest that harmony. So what we become with this awareness about practicing in a Sangha, we become a pacemaker cell for everyone. There's a ripple effect of Cornerstones that affects Sangha life and our own life dramatically. I know that the best Dharma talk I can ever give is my example, my practice. Not sitting here talking to wonderful people like you, though. I hope that's okay, but my best Dharma talk is my practice. It's my example. Gandhi was right on when he said, my life is my message. And if you can consider making the Sangha the masterpiece of your life, the contribution you will make is enormous. Because when the Sangha is there with us, we can transform not only our own suffering, but the suffering of our ancestors and our descendants. Our ancestors, deceased or still living, our descendants, both those born and unborn, will thank us. They will say, it's very nice of you, Rachel, to do this for us. Or thank you, Pam, for being so kind to do this for us. All from the ripple effect of Sangha Cornerstones. So in a sense, there are building blocks here that I want you to at least pay attention to. If you want a strong Sangha that can do extraordinary things, build cornerstones. Bring those cornerstones to Sangha practice. Set up satellite Sanghas of Fish Lake, here, there, and everywhere. This is happening in Ottawa. And one of the things I am amazed by in terms of the cornerstone energy, this is the strength of Pine Gate Sangha at home. And it enables Pine Gate to be the nucleus of a citywide coalition in Ottawa, which consists of over 40 other groups. So sometimes we're 5,000 strong when we have a peace song circle on Parliament Hill. And as a nucleus of this coalition, we're very aware that we're the cornerstone of this coalition. And I am just amazed. I don't do this. Don't think I'm not taking any credit for this at all. It's the cornerstones that have been established by people like the Sisters in the Hood and many other people in the Sangha. And they're there, they volunteer, they bring their energy. And it's making a difference to our northern city. We're also infusing our collective expertise into a new eco-community that's going to be built on a disused Air Force base. We couldn't do that if we didn't have Cornerstones. And they put on a wonderful healing fair in the spring. It's called Cosmic Pathways Healing Fair. This would appeal to people in Florida, I'm sure. And it's a major fundraiser for the Friends for Peace Coalition, but it's a showcase for the alternative medical community in its own right. And it is wonderful. People leave there charged because you're meeting all kinds of traditions, all kinds of practices of mindfulness. Then every fall we have a Peace Prayer Day, which brings thousands of people to City Hall. This is a multi-faith, multicultural celebration of peace, a determination around planetary care. And bridges are built. And we give out peace awards to prominent citizens who have dedicated to their life to planetary care, to peace, and to social justice. And we build bridges between our award recipients so they start to work together. And it's growing. And it's growing organically. The foundation is the cornerstones in the Sangha. And I offer a deep bow of gratitude to all the Sangha members who have taken the forethought, the time, and the skill to create cornerstones. But one thing that is very, very clear, to do this, we take a big step beyond the superficial. Superficial doesn't cut it. Plastic smiles don't cut it. Easy fixes. Perfect bowing with a plastic smile. It doesn't cut it. It's the dedicated creation of Sangha cornerstones, the creation of harmony. And it works. I'm talking from experience. I'm not talking about a notion. I'm not talking about an idea. I'm talking about something concrete that has surprised me and also enriched me. Enormously enriched me. So to receive the energy of the Buddha as living Dharma, we have to take that step beyond the superficial. Practice as a Sangha is not about being superficial. How can we be superficial with global warming not coming at some future point in time? It's here now, and it's unstoppable. So we have to find the best way that we can to adjust to it and to deal with it. And it's going to take the insight and the wisdom of Sanghas, practicing as Sangha bodies, not as individual selves. And this goes against the thread of American history in terms of the American dream and individualism. Both have to be thrown away. The American dream of excessive consumption and richness has to be thrown away. Individualism has to be thrown away. If we're going to survive as a species with dignity to the end of this century, we have to throw much away that has brought us to this point in time. And when you taste the fruits of interbeing, as we do with the Coalition of Friends for Peace, there is so much confidence and joy which is tangibly experienced. It's harmony in action. And for me, it is the Buddha in action. Because I know that the cornerstones from Pine Gate Sangha, they are the gel, the nucleus, the glue of the citywide coalition. And we have to realize that everyone can touch this. There's a basic wisdom inside every person here, every person you meet on the street, even the people driving Hummers to do their shopping. There's a basic core of wisdom in them. We need the instruments of practice in order to reach them. Because there's so much mud in our minds, and it's going to take the instruments of practice to remove the mud. The bell is one instrument of practice. Touching the earth is a wonderful practice to remove the mud created by our ancestors in our minds. And the goal of mindfulness practice, the goal of meditation, is to touch immortality within ourselves. By immortality, I'm referring to the notion of no birth and no death. And here we have to be aware of two different dimensions of understanding, although the dimensions are interconnected. We have to understand the historical dimension and the ultimate dimension. The historical dimension refers to the notions of birth and death, of time and space. And these are notions that have been created by our mind so we can organize ourselves within the reality of the historical dimension. The ultimate dimension, nirvana, the Pure Land, the kingdom of God, many names for it. Through meditation, we can touch this ultimate dimension. We can touch the immortality in ourselves, and we enter a vast spaciousness, which is space beyond space, which is time beyond time. I would like to give you an example of this. Last winter, I did a solo retreat at a place called Still Point on the Madawaska River, 100 miles west of Ottawa. And I spent 5 days in silence and solitude. And I just watched and listened to the winter voice of Mother Earth. And when I returned to my university, one of my colleagues, who's quite interested in what I do, he asked me, "What did you do for 5 days?" And I told him the truth. I said, "I listened deeply to the river freeze over." And he said, "What do you mean by listening deeply?" So I told him about the 4th mindfulness training on loving speech and compassionate listening. And I said, deep listening is the key to this major training in Buddhism, and that there are 3 levels to deep listening. The first level is intellectual, where we read about deep listening, we look at scriptures, commentaries, and so on about deep listening, and we can generally agree that it's a good idea, but it's all in the head. This is a starting place, but it's the least useful level of deep listening. The second level of deep listening is experiential. It's when you look at the experience of yourself when you were not listened to. And then you examine the experience of others that you did not take the time to listen deeply to. And I remember with all my children, now that they're all adult and making their way in life, when they were growing up and small, I often did not have time to listen to them. I wasn't present. I was too busy with work crises, crises in my first marriage, and so on. Didn't have the energy or the focus to listen deeply to them. And I've said individually to each child, now that they're young men and young women, I remember the time when I didn't listen deeply to you, when you had such concerns, and I'm very sorry. And they do the aw shucks shuffle. You remember that, Dad? And I said, of course I remember, and so do they. But my apology to them allows the healing of rifts that have been unspoken for years. So this experiential level of deep listening, I thought that was it. That's it for deep listening. I'm doing it. I'm doing a good job. And then I discovered there are much deeper levels. And it took a major crisis for me to learn this. And that crisis was brought about by one of my sons being mired in the drug underworld of Glasgow in Scotland. It wasn't that he was a drug user, he was also a drug dealer. And he was deeply in trouble. And I arranged to spend some time with him in Glasgow. And this is quite an adventure with my son, but there's only certain aspects I want to communicate to you at this time. I have to admit how ignorant I was about the drug culture. It's a world I knew nothing about. And I didn't have a clue what to do. All I had was my mindfulness practice, particularly my deep listening. My son and his friends, punks, drug dealers. There was a pimp. Several of the girls there were also working as prostitutes to pay for their drug habits. I nicknamed their home Punk Palace, which they were quite happy. They liked the palace bit. And I got to know them and realized how lost they were. But with my son, we embarked on practicing mindfulness together. That's all I had. I didn't have anything else. And I discovered a deeper level to deep listening. Several of his friends asked me if I would teach them walking meditation one night. I taught this to my son Alexander. And I said, yes, I would be happy to, provided they could stay drug-free for 2 days, which was quite an undertaking for them. But they met that request, and 2 days later there followed the most hilarious adventure. Because at midnight, this is when they decided they wanted to do walking meditation with me. And they wanted to do it in one of Glasgow's finest private parks. Glasgow has many private parks which are locked, and they're there for the rich and famous to enjoy. But they wanted to do it in one of these very beautiful private parks. Now, they were very agile, so they would just bounce over the railings, which is something impossible for me. So they boosted me up a tree, told me to crawl along a branch. Then they all bounced over, and they said, drop. So I dropped, and they caught me, and when we stopped laughing, after we picked ourselves up, we did walking meditation for hours in this beautiful park. Then we sat on a park bench and they talked to me. I said very, very little. They poured out their hearts, their distress, their worries. And as I was listening to them, I don't remember everything that they said, but I remember clearly to this day what I felt. I felt I was dissolving. The I of me, the I of my ego was dissolving. That I was just particles of energy, interconnecting to the same particles of energy in these young people, connecting to the night sounds of the city of Glasgow, to the park bench, to the grass, to the trees. It's almost impossible to put into words what I felt. And just before dawn, We sat there in an incredible silence. They felt the same kind of energy. And one of them told me afterwards that it was much better than a drug high. And I said, well, this won't get you into trouble. And then we left the same way we came in. Their departure was fine. Mine was not very elegant because they had to find another tree for me to boost me up, and I would crawl along a branch and then they would catch me. And I was very relieved they caught me because it was concrete rather than grass I was landing on. And we all walked back to their home. And the smiles and the hugs, they hugged one another. And they hugged me. And I knew something had changed. And I saw an immediate manifestation of it next morning. Because I would never use the bathrooms in their house or the kitchen. There was mold on the unknown to science list. So I wouldn't use their bathrooms. I would go to a nearby swimming pool and have a morning swim, and then I'd come back with breakfast for them. And when I came back the morning after, the two friends and my son Alexander were sitting on the doorstep with a smile, and in broad Scottish Glasgow accents they said, well, Mr. Prattis, you do not have to go to your swimming pool for your early morning swims anymore. We have cleaned the bathroom for you and we won't be using it. And it was spotless. It was spotless. I still wouldn't eat anything from the kitchen though, although that did get a cursory clean. So when I finished this story about this feeling of time beyond time, of space beyond space, I stopped talking and I looked at my colleague. He was smiling. He had understood.